close friend of mine should have been on track for a 99 ATAR. She was smart, hardworking, and had big goals. But there was one thing holding her back: procrastination. She wasn't lazy and she wasn't unmotivated, but every time she sat down to study, she'd feel overwhelmed. Should she start with practice papers, revise her notes, or watch another explainer video? But instead of making progress, she would doom scroll TikTok, reorganize her desk, or convince herself that she'd start tomorrow. I remember her telling me, "I know what I need to do, but I just can't bring myself to start." Sound familiar? The turning point came when she stopped trying to fight procrastination and instead understood it. In this video, I'm going to share what she shared with me, including the lessons about how procrastination manifests itself and how you can change your circumstances. I'll start with the first lesson. Procrastination happens when a task feels too big or too small. You need to break it down into a clear, manageable first step. Most students think procrastination is about being lazy, but the real reason you put things off is because a task feels either too overwhelming or too insignificant. When something feels too big, like study for my final exams, your brain sees it as a huge, undefined challenge and immediately tries to escape it. On the other hand, if a task feels too small, like revising vocabulary words, it seems too easy, so you tell yourself, "I'll do it later," only to keep putting it off. My friend who was aiming for a 99 ATAR struggled with this exact problem. Every time she sat down to study, she felt paralyzed by the sheer amount of work ahead of her. Instead of making progress, she'd end up scrolling social media or tidying her desk to feel productive. The turning point for her was learning how to break down big tasks into micro actions, small, specific steps that felt easy enough to start, but structured enough to create momentum. Instead of saying, "I need to study for biology," she changed it to, "I'll summarize the key points from chapter 5 in 5 sentences." Or instead of saying, "I need to revise for maths," she told herself, "I'll solve 3 past problem questions on differentiation." The smaller the step, the easier it is to begin. Once she got started, she naturally kept going because momentum took over. If you're struggling to start studying, the problem isn't necessarily your discipline, it's how you're framing the task. The next time you catch yourself avoiding something, stop and ask, how can I make this so small that it feels impossible to fail? If you can get yourself to start, you've already won half the battle. The next thing she taught me was that if you rely solely on willpower or motivation, you'll fail. There's a reason you keep putting off studying, even when you know that it's important. You tell yourself you'll get started as soon as you feel motivated, but that moment never really comes. 1 hour turns into a whole afternoon, and before you know it, you're cramming at midnight, wondering where did the time go? You probably had days where studying feels effortless, where you're locked in, focused, and getting through work without distractions. And then there are the other days, where no matter how much you remind yourself that exams are coming up, you just can't bring yourself to open your textbook. So you wait, hoping motivation will kick in at some point. And this is where most people get it wrong. Most people think that high-achieving students feel motivated all the time, but that's really not the case. In reality, the students who consistently score 99 plus ATARs aren't actually relying on motivation at all. They've simply removed the need for it. One of the best ways to do this is by creating a study system that runs on autopilot. A good example is how professional athletes train. They don't wake up and decide whether or not they feel like practicing. They have a set schedule, a structured routine, and non-negotiable habits that make showing up automatic. The same principle applies to studying. Instead of deciding each day when or how long to study, set a fixed rule. I study for 30 minutes after school before I even touch my phone. Or I do 1 Pomodoro session as soon as I sit down at my desk. The goal is to eliminate decision making. When studying is part of your daily routine, it removes the resistance of having to get started. The shift is what separates students who study consistently from those who only do it when they feel like it. Because let's be honest, most of the time, you won't feel like it. But if you have a system that makes studying automatic, that feeling won't matter. You'll just get it done. The third lesson is centered around how your brain operates. Your brain naturally avoids tasks that don't feel rewarding. Think about it this way. Imagine you have 2 options: scroll through TikTok or start studying for your HSC. One gives instant entertainment, dopamine hits, and a feeling of connection, whereas the other requires effort, feeling overwhelmed, and it won't give you any real payoff for weeks or months. So of course your brain is wired to choose the first option every time. This isn't even a self-discipline problem, it's biology. Your brain prioritizes immediate gratification over delayed rewards, which is why studying feels so much harder to start than binge watching Netflix or replying to a group chat. The problem is that most people try to fight this natural tendency with willpower alone, and that rarely works. Instead, you have to hack your brain's reward system. My friends didn't just push through study sessions because they're better at discipline. They created immediate rewards that make studying feel more enjoyable in the moment. One simple way to do this is by pairing studying with something you enjoy. Maybe you only drink your favorite iced coffee while doing past papers, or you light a candle every time you sit down to study, making it feel more relaxing. Some students use a method called temptation bundling, when they only listen to their favorite study playlist or wear their most comfortable hoodie when they study. The goal is to associate studying with something positive instead of just seeing it as a chore. Another method is gamifying the process. If you're struggling to start, turn it into a challenge. Set a timer and see how many questions you can complete in 15 minutes. Or reward yourself. If I get through 40 minutes of uninterrupted study, I get to watch one episode of my favorite show. This works because your brain sees an instant benefit of studying rather than just a vague future reward. So if you've been fighting against your brain's tendency to procrastinate, stop trying to force yourself into motivation. Instead, stack small rewards into your study routine so that getting started doesn't feel like such a battle. Now, have you ever sat down at your desk, ready to study, only to spend the first 15 minutes trying to figure out where to start? You skim through your notes, maybe open a few past papers, but you don't actually make any real progress. Before you know it, half an hour has passed and you convince yourself that you'll just start tomorrow. This is what happens when you don't set clear, specific goals before you start studying, which is lesson number 4. The more decisions that you have to make in the moment, the more likely you are to procrastinate. Your brain doesn't like ambiguity. It prefers certainty and structure. If you don't have a plan, you'll default to easy, low-effort activities like rewriting notes, color coding, or rewatching a lecture instead of actually doing deep work that will actually improve your results. High-achieving students don't waste mental energy figuring out what to do every time they study. They decide their study tasks in advance, so that when they do sit down, they can go straight into focused work. Instead of saying, I'll study chemistry this afternoon, they'll get specific. They'll say, from 4 to 4:30, I'll summarize chapter 5 in 5 key points. They complete 5 practice questions on acids and bases. There's no room for hesitation because the plan is already set. A simple way to implement this is by using the end of day planning method. Before you finish studying for the day, take 2 minutes to decide what you'll work on during the next session and make sure to write it down. This way, when you sit down to study tomorrow, you'll already know exactly where to start, eliminating the friction that often leads to procrastination. And then, my last lesson is your environment makes or breaks your focus. So design a study space that eliminates distractions. If studying feels impossible some days, it might not be a motivation issue. It might just be your environment. The space you study in has a direct impact on your ability to focus. And if you're constantly battling distractions, your brain is going to take the path of least resistance, procrastination. Think about the last time you sat down to study. Was your phone within arm's reach? Were notifications popping up on your screen? Were you sitting somewhere where people could easily interrupt you? These tiny factors might not seem like a big deal, but they create constant friction that pulls your attention away from studying. One of the biggest game changers is removing digital distractions before you even start. If your phone is on your desk, I can guarantee you will check it. Even if you tell yourself you won't, your brain is wired to seek novelty, and the temptation will always be there. So instead of relying on willpower, put your phone in another room, turn off notifications from your laptop, or use an app like Forest to lock yourself out of social media for a set period. Another key factor is creating a dedicated study space. If you study in the same place where you relax, your brain associates this space with leisure, making it harder to focus. Even if you don't have a separate room, small changes, like always sitting at the same desk, using noise-cancelling headphones, or even just adjusting your lighting, can signal to your brain that it's time to work. Finally, use environmental cues to trigger focus. Some students find that having a specific study playlist, wearing noise-cancelling headphones, or even having a particular scented candle that they only use while studying helps them shift into work mode. Your brain thrives on associations. If you're repeatedly studying in a focused environment, it will start linking that space with deep work, making it easier to get into the zone. We've covered a lot here, but I hope that you now know that procrastination isn't a personality trait. It's just your brain avoiding discomfort. Now, I want you to pick just one strategy from this video and start using it today. Whether it's setting up a distraction-free study space, creating a small reward for each study session, or planning your next study session before you finish today, just commit to one and make it a habit. And then let me know how you go in the comments. If you want to take this even further, the next step is to learn how to structure your study schedule in a way that works with your energy levels and prevents burnout. That's exactly what I cover in this next video on setting up a study schedule that actually helps you stay consistent and avoid last-minute cramming. Click here to watch it now. I look forward to seeing you there. And finally, if you want to step up your study game even further, I recommend trying Excel HSC Copilot. It's a learning platform that includes detailed study notes, concept maps, and past papers with instant AI feedback on your answers. Check out the link in the description to try it now for free. Thanks for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.